BYU with the most stunning result of week 4, and yeah, I don't buy them.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. USC gets embarrassed by a flawless game plan executed by Michigan. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Spencer, how could they be embarrassed by a 3-point loss? I'm going to tell you. And there are a bunch of letdown teams in the ACC, and then Oklahoma is also in that particular camp. But I want to start with the most surprising outcome, 38-9. 38-9? Kansas State walks into Provo as a 6.5-point favorite. Most people, myself included, picked them to win the game, thought it could be close. In no universe did I have BYU blowout on my bingo card. I did not see it coming. And here's the thing. If you play this game 10 more times, BYU blows out Kansas State 0 more times. The reason I do not buy into BYU, who's better than I expected, let's make that inexplicably clear. Because BYU, I was not high on the Cougars, and they are finding ways to win football games. They do not look sustainable to me. This game, I won't say it was drunk because it was in Provo, so the Diet Coke was flowing. The caffeine was a buzzing, or the sugar high. Whatever they are doing, the crowd was electric. I've felt those fans in Provo before. I've called a game at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. It was magnificent, and they were great on Saturday night. That's not the surprise. The surprise is that they blew them out. But here's the thing. 241 total yards of offense. 241 total yards of offense. They were 3 of 9 on third down. They ran for 92 yards, and they won the game 38-9. BYU has every expectation right now of being more than a bottom tier Big 12 team. That they can be a bowl team, that they can be a 7-8 win team. Sure, you can expect that. I am not putting the Cougars into the upper echelon of the Big 12. This game was so off its rocker, it needed to be put into a home. It was off the rails. The train was off the tracks. Everything wild. Kansas State, late in the first half, led 6-3 with the football and trailed 17-6 going into the half. And then BYU fields a punt that goes back to the 2-yard line at one point and results in a touchdown. It's an awesome play. BYU deserves the credit because they're finding ways to win football games. You can't find a way to win a football game if you're not sustainably building an offense. If you're not sustainably, now their defense is good. I think we've seen that in the last couple of weeks. I like what Kalani Sitake and company with Jay Hill, who's a legendary coach in the state of Utah. He was at Weber State, did a great job. His defense is cooking. That's what I like about the Cougars. I like their defense a lot. I do not look at this offense and say, yeah, you can go toe-to-toe with the big kids in the Big 12. I don't really know who the big kids are because, Kansas, well, yeah, they're letting me down. And is West Virginia? I don't think so. And Colorado and Baylor, it kind of looks like it's Utah in the field. I'm not selling my stock on Kansas State. Avery Johnson had a bad day. He looked like a 19-year-old kid playing quarterback. Avery Johnson had a really, really bad day. The Big 12 remains ridiculously wide open because Cam Rising can't get healthy. I think the Big 12 should be grateful that he's not, because if he were, Utah would be running everybody out of the building. And let's pivot into that game here. Good for BYU. That was an awesome game. That was an awesome win. I do not buy them as Big 12 title contender at all. Utah goes into Stillwater and beats Oklahoma State without Cam Rising. Now, some of us didn't believe in Oklahoma State this year. Some of us did not think that Alan Bowman was capable of leading you to a conference championship. How's that take looking right about now? Not every take that I have ages well. How'd that one look? Isaac Wilson? Look, he's not perfect, but when he's good enough, I watched Kyle Whittingham win a lot of football games with backup quarterbacks before he did it last year in a loaded Pac-12, RIP. Though, he's making a comeback. Talk about that on tomorrow's show. I think that for Utah, if they can just get Cam Rising healthy, this will be a no-brainer conference championship. I mean, that's where the standard should be. That's where the expectation should be if Cam Rising is there, because nobody else in the Big 12 wants to elevate. Everybody wants to play down to a level they shouldn't be, or bottom-tier teams are playing up. And Oklahoma State, you can't lose that football game. You just can't. Now, I don't think Utah is locked into a Big 12 title game appearance because, well, Cam Rising isn't playing. I don't know what this guy did to offend the football gods, but he's clearly done something. And whatever that is, maybe it's playing his college career too long. I don't know. What I do know is that Isaac Wilson is capable. That's a heck of a win. That is a heck of a win. But I watched Utah do this exact same thing with Bryson Barnes last year. They will not win the Big 12 if Cam Rising does not return. Just because they beat Oklahoma State, somebody else will go get it. I don't know who that's going to be. Texas Tech seems to have figured it out. They had a nice win against Arizona State. I don't know. Like your guess might be as good as mine. But if Cam Rising gets healthy, yeah, I think this conference title race is, for all intents and purposes, over. Because the fact they won that game without Cam Rising playing, that's not a good look for Oklahoma State. And I think the Cowboys are in trouble as the year goes on. Colorado. Thanks to the magical will of Baylor to lose football games, I remain perfect picking Colorado and 3-1 against the spread. So, I don't know. What did I predict Colorado to be? Oh, that's right, a 6-6 football team. What did they kind of look like on Saturday night? A 6-6 football team. Colorado is going to be the ultimate test, Arizona as well, of how far can a great quarterback and a great receiver take you. This game was in Boulder, not Provo. It was drunk. Many of the students were as they ran on the field before the review. I hope Travis Hunter finds a way to get himself to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, because is there a more singularly impactful player that isn't a quarterback? The answer is no, there's not. In all of college football, I don't care who you're talking about. Travis Hunter is that guy. He's making all the plays on offense. It is just Shedeur and Travis. I don't think this was Shedeur's best game. I don't think it was his worst. I think his offensive line looked a lot closer to last year than they did what they showed in the first few weeks, but Colorado found a way to win. Just a Hail Mary. And you know what? This is what Colorado is. They've got great skill position guys. They're improved in the trenches, but not great. And the offensive line can still have a really bad day. And guess what? When you've got an NFL quarterback and an NFL receiver / defensive back that's better than anybody else on the field, you can just overwhelm teams on the perimeter and win football games. That doesn't take you to a Big 12 championship. That doesn't take you to an 8-9 win season, but it takes you somewhere, and it's taken the Buffs to 3-1. One of the most insane, between that and BYU, there was just some craziness in the Rocky Mountain region of the United States last night. There was just some absolute craziness. So Colorado wins in overtime because Travis Hunter forces a fumble on the goal line. Poor Baylor had the game won. All they had to do was not allow a Hail Mary. They tried to allow two. Was someone on Baylor throwing the game because they bet Colorado -1 or something? You had a Hail Mary hit a receiver's chest at the 5-yard line. He drops it, and then the next play, you allow a 50-plus yard Hail Mary? I've never seen anything like that before. But if Dave Aranda ends up fired at the end of the year, that game is going to be a non-zero contributing reason as to why. Because how on earth do you lose that football game? I don't know, but they found a way to do it. Only Baylor right now. Poor Bears fans in Waco. But Colorado is 3-1, exactly as I predicted them to be. So the Big 12 is just all sorts of craziness and wildness, and we thought coming into the year it'd be the most fun conference title race, and guess what? It is, because the clear prohibitive favorite can't keep their quarterback on the field to save their life, and that makes it a little bit more interesting, if not, still frustrating for Utah fans, but Utah's undefeated. Colorado's 3-1. What a time. What a time in the Big 12. Also, shout out Texas Tech. They played a good game against a scrappy Arizona State squad. We're going to the Big 10 because USC lost the game by 3. I thought they'd win, but it was embarrassing, and I'll tell you why next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, guess what? You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Plus, everything that you want for college football, it's all over there. And guess what? If you had Baylor +1 in Boulder or Baylor money line, you're probably not feeling very good. But as they always say, this is sage gambling advice. Win it all back on the next one. That is not, let's make something clear, that's sarcasm. Intense, heavy sarcasm. Don't bet anything you can't afford to lose, but if you can, go check out FanDuel because they've got everything. They've got college football, they have got NFL, they've got everything that you want over at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. That is the place to go. Check them out, FanDuel.com. It was an under-the-radar crazy day in the Big Ten, outside of the USC-Michigan game, of course. This is an embarrassing loss for USC. I know they lost by 3. I know that Michigan is a good team. And by the way, when they lost to Texas, I didn't sell my Michigan stock. I just didn't think they'd win the football game, and they wouldn't have if not for, one singular play, which is what it came down to. I don't know how much more exciting of a weekend of college football it could have been. You had a Hail Mary in Boulder. You had craziness in Provo. You had USC-Michigan. It was just magnificent across the board, as always in this beautiful, wonderful sport. But the reason this is an embarrassing loss for USC is Michigan made it very, very clear that they had one thing they can do on offense. And I asked the question going into the game, how are you going to score points? How are you going? Well, the answer is you're just going to push USC around. USC's defense, make no mistake about it, is an improved unit. They are an improved unit. They are not there yet. And they got embarrassed in this football game. Michigan had, wait for it, 32 passing yards. 32 passing yards. 32. There were individual completions longer than 32 yards that teams completed all over the country. Michigan needed 32 yards to score in the air to score 27 points. Michigan manhandled USC, and it was evident from the first half. USC's offense got off to a sluggish start. I had USC's point total predicted right on the money. But how did Michigan make it work? They ran the football. They ran the football. This was a clinic from Sharon Moore. And number one, Michigan saves their season because if you lost this game, you weren't going unbeaten the rest of the way. And the college football playoff, that wasn't going to happen. That's still back into the fold. That's the first thing. And second thing, Sharon Moore, this had a very Penn State feel to it. Of, you know what? We don't need to score 40 points. We don't need to throw the football if we can just run it. Michigan's a one-trick pony, but it's a tough trick to stop. And if you can't, this is what it's going to look like. So for any team that plays Michigan this year, if you have no ability to slow down their rushing attack, then you have no ability to blow them out. You could still win the football game, and Michigan's operating on a very razor-thin margin. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong here, and maybe I'm just going into my Michigan hater mode, which is sarcasm, of course, because I'm told all the time that I hate Michigan, and that's news to me. But Michigan, that executed a flawless game plan here, do you think you can win every single game that you play? Do you think you can win all but one game the rest of the season throwing for 32 yards a game? Yeah, I don't. But can you win throwing for less than 200 yards a game? I do, because I've seen Michigan do that many a times. And Michigan found their groove on the offensive line. They found the rushing attack. They've got a dynamic tandem to complement Donovan Edwards and what Alex Orji brings to the table running the football. The defense finally looked the way that we expected. You know what? This game told me plenty about USC, and it told me plenty about Michigan. But it told me even more about Texas, because I don't think that USC team is bad. I think they're good. I've been one of their biggest fans the entire offseason. And Michigan went in there and manhandled them in the line of scrimmage. Go back to the Texas game. The Longhorns went into that same environment and dominated. Texas is the number one team in the AP poll right now. They're probably deserving of that, even though I'd still pick Georgia as my top team just because they had one bad game. Doesn't make them not the best team in college football, but boy, that says a lot about Texas because the Longhorns were able to do whatever they were wanting to in that football game. And it turns out that remnants of last year's Michigan team is still in there, which is why I thought they had one of the highest floors in college football this year. I don't think they can go worse than 8-4. I predicted them 8-4, 9-3, depending on how a couple things go. That's probably where they're still headed. That's a good football team. It's limited with their offensive attack. Not having Colston Loveland probably hurt them in the passing game a decent amount. He's been their best receiving target all season long. But that game told me plenty about Texas. And yeah, I think that Texas team is really good. I don't think going in Michigan, because remember, after that game, you start to wonder, oh, is Michigan, are they TCU? Are they falling off? And if you go back and listen to what I said after that game, that was not my takeaway at all. I didn't think Michigan had played their best football game. I thought they'd play better games, and I thought they would have better games ahead. And lo and behold, it came here. Thought USC would win the football game. I was wrong on the pick, but I was right in saying that Michigan is not going to bottom out. And they didn't. So I think that's just an impressive win for Texas, but that's an embarrassing loss for USC because Michigan made it very clear they had no interest in throwing the football. I don't know what they thought the Wolverines were going to do. You watch them just run the football against Penn State, and it's one of two things. This is why I say 3-point loss in a heck of a football game is embarrassing for USC. You either couldn't make the schematic adjustment to they're not throwing the football and they can't throw the football, which I doubt because I think Danton Lynn's a really good defensive coordinator, or you did know that and you just couldn't stop him. You just couldn't stop him. You're USC. This is year 3 for Lincoln Riley. It's a revamped defense, but that was not a good day for the Michigan defense. Or for the USC defense, rather. It wasn't a terrible day, but it certainly wasn't a great one. So, good for Michigan. Good for Michigan because that was just an incredible game plan, and I was able to watch the first half of that game and then the end of it because I was calling a football game, and the trenches were dominated. Not won by Michigan, they were dominated by Michigan. Let's stay in the Big Ten for a moment because, oh dear, Nebraska. Oh dear, Nebraska. I don't know what Cornhusker fans did to deserve this. All they have done is show up time and time and time and time again, however many consecutive sellouts it's been, basically my entire life, I think. And they keep getting punched below the belt. Those poor fans. Good for Illinois. Good for Illinois. Surprising people, myself included. Luke Altmaier is a completely different football player. That guy's a gamer. I enjoy watching him play. Brett Bielema has got a good football team. I don't think they're a great football team. I think they're a good one. I think Nebraska is still a good football team. Something about that stadium. Do they need to play at a neutral site like Kansas for their home games to break the curse of one possession losses, of having their hearts ripped out of their chests? Friday night, 31-24 in overtime. I mean, you miss a field goal, you have a wide open guy in the end zone. Right after Dylan Raiola misses a wide open guy in the end zone on 3rd and 3. Didn't you feel like Nebraska was going to miss a field goal? Because I certainly did. And then they did. And then they go to overtime and lose. And that's just, it's a gut-wrenching loss. No mistake about it. The question becomes for Nebraska, how do you respond? How do you respond? Season's not over. You can still have a great year. Not a good year. You could have a great year by Nebraska standards in, the last several. Because making a bowl game, well, that'd be a good season. But having 8 or 9 wins, it's still feasible. They're not going to be undefeated, obviously, going into Ohio State. But you can still win a lot of games before that. You can still win a lot of games after that. I was heartbroken for Nebraska fans because they had to watch that unfold again. It's the same story. Corporate needs you to find the difference between these two pictures. They're the same picture. You could do that with about 17 Nebraska games in the last 2 weeks, it feels like. Tough times for the Cornhuskers. I think they will be okay. I still think they're a good football team. I think Illinois is just a lot better than I expected. And they went in, and Illinois deserves full props. I mean, that's a heck of a win for Brett Bielema and company. So, also, they didn't win. I will shout out UCLA and Deshaun Foster. They had LSU tied at the half. I thought LSU was going to boat race them. They didn't cover the 22.5. Props to the Bruins. They played a good game. They did lose, and then they've got Oregon this week at home. Fun times in the Big Ten. Man, that was a good week of football. Wasn't a great week of football for Oklahoma. Sooners got problems. How do they address those problems? That's coming up next. Coming up right now is Game Time, which has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you want. They've got all-in pricing. You toggle that feature, and then boom. No surprise fees at checkout. Shows your total up front. You get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. You get their lowest price guarantee. All of this stuff is why you should check out Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Jackson Arnold benched. Yikes. That's not good. That is not good. A friend of mine who's a Texas fan legitimately texted me on Sunday saying September 8th and said that by halftime of the Tennessee game, he was going to be benched. And I thought, get out of here. That's absurd. That's completely insane. That's not going. And then it happened. 25-15. I had Tennessee winning a game by 11. Tennessee wins a game by 10. I'm not utterly shocked. My opinion of Tennessee has not changed. I think the Vols are a really good team. Oklahoma's not ready. Jackson Arnold needs to be reinserted to the starting lineup. I understand taking him out to try to win the football game. It's the SEC opener. You are at home in front of your fans, and you're putting up an absolute dud. But if you're Brett Venables, you put Jackson Arnold out there. Unless you feel for sure like you've got a better option behind him, this is not a season in which I had high hopes for Oklahoma because their schedule is brutal and their team is solid, but they're making a quarterback change. And guess what? You're either committed to Jackson Arnold or you're not. You don't want to be going back and forth. That's how guys hit the portal, and then you're doing this again next year where you're resetting at the quarterback position. They go at Auburn this week. Speaking of disappointing letdown teams, how about the Auburn Tigers? 2 home losses in the first 4 games. Yikes. We'll talk about that more later this week. But you've got Auburn, and then you've got Texas. You have South Carolina at home. I think we agree that's not an easy game. At Ole Miss. Then they play Maine, at Missouri, Alabama, at LSU. This was never going to be, if you're being honest with yourself, as I was trying to be with Sooner fans before the year and was told that I'm just an SEC homer and blah-diddy-blah-diddy-blah. And like, okay, I think we understand now. Oklahoma is not ready for the big time in the SEC. But that doesn't mean they can't be next year. And you know what you need in this conference? You need a high-level quarterback. Jackson Arnold can still be that guy. The potential he hasn't just gone out the window. One bad game doesn't define your entire career. It's not like that in the NFL. It's not like that in college. So I understand taking him out. He should be reinserted as the starter, and you should understand that you need him to learn on the job. You need him to have the opportunity to grow. He can't grow on the sideline. He cannot grow on the sideline. He has to go through these struggles. Because this year for Oklahoma was never going to be a playoff season. It was never going to be, at least not in my view, a conference title contending season. That schedule is absolutely brutal. It will likely be easier next season. I don't know if it can be harder than this. Give me a tougher 3-game stretch than at Missouri, host Alabama, at LSU. The easiest game in there is probably at Missouri, who's currently a top 10 team. Now, they're overrated as a top 10 team, but I think for Oklahoma, I know it's just one loss. Sure, you could win out. Do you have any confidence in this Sooners team to go and win the rest of their games? You think they're beating Texas right now? You think they're beating Alabama? I don't even know if they're beating South Carolina. You're certainly not beating Ole Miss on the road. So once you stack all that up, that takes the playoff out of the equation. Arnold's got the highest ceiling. He should be your quarterback in 2025. But you need to know, you can't have this back and forth. It was okay for one game, but you cannot maintain this, okay, you're no good, we're coming out. That's not how you build a sustainable quarterback position. You got to let the guy learn. You got to give him an actual chance. I always viewed this as a wash year, a bury the tape sort of year. Oklahoma, I thought they could be, I think they can and will be a bowl team. I think their defense is pretty good. You see the way that Tennessee offense played this year? Yeah, the Tennessee offense has been pretty dominant. They went in Norman, they scored 25 points. Oklahoma's defense, pretty darn good. I'm not punting on Brent Venables. I'm not punting on the Sooners' ability to win in the SEC. But for this year, I am. Because I was never in on the Sooners' ability to win a high level in the SEC this year. You should go back to Jackson Arnold, and you should let him improve. Let him get better and be in these spots and give him the best opportunity to succeed for 2025. Now, for Oklahoma fans, it probably sounds like I'm overreacting. Spencer, it's one loss. It's one bad game. What if they do this, that, and the other thing? I'm just saying I have no faith because I never did, and now I have information to confirm what I already thought. I believe they call that confirmation bias, that Oklahoma is not going to be an upper-tier team in the SEC this year. But this revolving door of quarterbacks, yeah, that needs to not continue because that doesn't do you any favors. If you're Oklahoma, you want to go out and show that you can be a good team in the SEC. Go win 7-8 games. Come back with Jackson Arnold next year. But it's pretty clear Oklahoma is not ready to win right now, but Jackson Arnold does not need to be kicked to the curb as a starting quarterback. I don't think that does anybody any favors. So, pretty disappointing performance for Oklahoma, but I'd stick with Jackson Arnold and keep things going. Let's go over to the ACC to wrap up today's show because this was just a slew of letdown performances. I don't know who's going to challenge Clemson and Miami for the ACC title. The answer is probably nobody. Maybe Louisville. They had a nice win against Georgia Tech. The ACC is just a slew of disappointment everywhere you look. Disappointment, letdown, shortcomings, whatever you want to call it. That's what the ACC is right now. North Carolina, I had this one flagged before the year. Did not pick it going into last week, but you go back and I was talking about Mac Brown, and I don't know how much longer Mac Brown's going to be there. 70 points on your home field to James Madison. Oofta. That's not good. Virginia Tech loses to Rutgers after already having lost to Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt, solid team, it appears. They went into Columbia, Missouri, and pushed the Tigers into overtime. Almost won the football game, but they lose 30-27. Virginia Tech was a team that I picked coming into the year to have a pop season, to win 10 games. I did the same thing with NC State. And NC State, now they had an injury at quarterback, although I don't know that it matters because the defense cannot stop a nosebleed. They've allowed 50 points twice this year. I mean, nothing good is happening on defense there for the Wolfpack. Virginia Tech, huge disappointment. And then it was the most Cal game. I should have seen it come. Cal plays to the level of their opponent every time, and they give Florida State their first win of the year because they couldn't make field goals and the offensive line fell apart. What do you know? The Bears go from 3-0 to 3-1. The Seminoles go from 0-3 to 1-3. And Cal just... And then you could go further up north, speaking of Bay Area teams. Syracuse, are they going to be a surprise? Nope, they lose at home to Stanford. They lose at home to Stanford. Kyle McCord not protecting the football. It's just disappointment everywhere you look. The ACC is very clear to me. Miami, Clemson, gap. Louisville, bigger gap. Everybody else, and I don't really care about them. Because as it pertains to the conference championship, I have not seen a single team. And I'm not crazy about Louisville. I think they're solid. I love their coaching staff. I think the quarterback's okay. Teams look pretty good so far. There is not a single team. It is the opposite of the Big 12. The Big 12 is wide open. Anybody could go win it. The SEC is very open. You could have Georgia. You could have Texas. You could have Bama. You could have Ole Miss. Lots of teams could win the SEC. Lots of teams could win the Big 12. Heck, several teams could win the Big 10. The ACC, this is a two-horse race. The good news for the conference is that if Clemson and Miami keep playing like this, they might both get into the playoff no matter what. Because an 11-win Power 4 team is not being left out. So if both those teams win 11 regular season games, and boy, Clemson could. I know everyone thinks Dabo Swinney's a bum. Newsflash, he is not. Clemson is pretty good. Don't know if they're great, but they're pretty darn good. They're better than everybody else in the ACC. That's just a slew of disappointment. There was a lot of disappointing football for fan bases across the country. Those seasons can be salvaged, but they can't live up to their full potential. Virginia Tech, Cal, North Carolina, NC State, oof, 59 points. That's not going to get it done. Not going to get it done. But we're done with today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.